So you're starting with Clubhouse now?
With, yes, Clubhouse and also with the live stream. Just one moment. Good morning to everybody. We're trying to work around the technical specifications of using two applications at the moment. Please be patient with us. And now we are going to run our usual
Insanity.
enjoy it. Yes. Looks
So
right.
I don't even need this silly mic, do I?
Maybe. Okay, good morning, Timothy.
Good morning, Maya. You can see the boat is rocking.
Yes, it is. Thankfully, you're still on it, I believe, so not in the water.
Precariously.
Precariously, yes. Well, good morning to everybody on Clubhouse and the people who are watching us on LinkedIn and YouTube as well. Thank you for being patient, trying to find ways to live stream this on different applications at the moment. So it looks like it will take a little bit longer for us to master the technical details. Thank you for being patient once again. As you know, we are here with Timothy Langley, the CEO of Langley Esquire, a consulting firm in downtown Tokyo. Today we are going to talk about the latest developments in the Japanese politics. Timothy has a few things to tell us, or maybe more than that. So without any further ado, Timothy, I'll give you the floor.
Okay, thank you, Maya, and good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us today. I am reporting live from the port of Hota, which is on the Chiba Peninsula, kind of close to the tip of the Chiba Peninsula, which is called Tateyama, but I'm a couple of maybe 24 kilometers in on a port called Hota. I'm on the good ship Santana. As almost always, we're broadcasting on Sundays, which my Saturdays and Sundays are almost always spent on the water. Thank you for joining us anyway. We're trying to improve the technical performance of our briefing. I've got a microphone here. We're on Wi-Fi for Clubhouse and for LinkedIn. We're trying to work out the bugs. Apologies for last week where I was on the water and the wind noise was really distracting. So we're trying to fix that too. So thank you for your comments. Always thank you for your encouragement. Thank you for linking up with Maya and myself, for joining us on the room, or for sending your questions into the chat so that I don't have to handle Maya's three-part sub A and sub B questions when she gets a chance. So please rescue me from that. So always we talk about what's going on in Japanese politics. This is important to you. There's a lot going on this last week. Thank you for joining us last week. For those of you who did, for those of you who didn't, you know, you got to be there and be square. Each week leads into the next week. And so you can understand some of the points that we're talking about now. The Prime Minister's approval rating stands at 37.6%. Those little percentage points make a lot of difference. He's still under 40%. He's been doing a little bit better. It's kind of one step forward, two steps back. He was doing better because of his firm approach in dealing with the Unification Church over the last 2 weeks. So typically it takes about a couple of days, 5 days or so, for us to get the analysis of what has been said in the Diet, what kind of ramifications of what's going on in LDP politics. But his star was beginning to come up because he was finally showing a little bit of determination, gumption, and actually making decisions. the prime minister has been criticized as, kento shimasu, I'm thinking about it. I'm going to do something about it. We've got this new economy that I'm thinking about without a whole lot of details. So we've been in the Kishida administration now for a year, and it's about time. So not only the people within his administration, within the LDP, but also the opposition party is becoming a little bit more rambunctious about, criticizing him, criticizing his leadership. So there's a couple of things that happened just this week. I wrote, if you might have picked it up on LinkedIn, that the last 48 hours were particularly active. I wrote that on Friday. So that was reflecting on what happened on Thursday and Friday. But even the week before, since we last talked, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday was extremely active. Currently, the prime minister is on a 10-day tour. He will be out of the country for 10 days, visiting 3 countries. He's in, I believe, Cambodia yesterday and today. He'll be in Bali on Tuesday and Thursday, and he's got one more trip scheduled. It's a very active diplomatic schedule that he's pursuing at a really delicate time. So I think those of you who are watching Japanese news know that there was a brouhaha with his justice minister that exploded on Tuesday, I believe. It began to heat up and percolate. They threw some cold water on it on Wednesday. That didn't work. He apologized to the chief cabinet secretary and said he promises not to do it again. And that also didn't work. And on Friday, he tendered his resignation, even as the prime minister was on his way to his 10-day trip. So we can get into what was said and what are the ramifications there. But overall, the prime minister, his ratings will come out again, maybe in a week or so. Yeah, it's hard to say. But the opposition parties are really clamoring and saying, you lack the leadership to lead this administration. So he's getting a lot of back talk there. I apologize for the wind noise. So let's see. He is in the ASEAN and the G20 in Cambodia, where he will meet with President Biden and President Yoon of South Korea. He's also going to be in Bali on Tuesday and Wednesday, Indonesia for the Asia Pacific Economic Cooperation. And in either of those, he is scheduled to meet President Xi of China. It's still kind of up in the air. It's not a great time for the Japanese prime minister to be meeting Xi, many analysts will say, because Japan doesn't have much to offer. It's just kind of going in with hat in hand. Xi is holding a lot of the cards. He just finished his plenary session where he's firmed up his position as the preeminent leader of China for the next 5 years at least. So going to talk with him about what's going on with Taiwan, with their aggressive moves in the Southeast China Seas, their ability to manage to some degree North Korea, and also Russia's ability to do the same thing. It looks like in Bali, Putin was invited. He will not appear. His foreign minister will appear instead. So this is a big week for not just the prime minister, but for all of the countries. They just finished the 20-year, well, it wasn't 20 years. It's been in existence 20 years. The naval review just this last week, 41 warships were in Tokyo and Sagami Bay. It was just amazing. You might remember that I reported from Hayama last week and sailed back to Chiba. And on the way, I passed many of these ships. I passed 2 aircraft carriers and a submarine. All 3 of them were apparently trying to kill me, but I did make it through. But it's unusual as a sailor, to see that many warships in Tokyo Bay and in Sagami Bay, very unusual. Two aircraft carriers, and those weren't Japanese aircraft carriers. The submarines you never can tell because they don't have any markings, but it passed close enough to me to see people on the conning tower. So sometimes it's really an exciting time to sail in Tokyo Bay. The Prime Minister did his review. It's the second time that the review was in Japanese waters, but this is a big deal. This is a show of force. This is an opportunity for like-minded countries to join Japan and show, China and North Korea, the strength of their opposition or their potential opposition to what's going on. For that many warships and battleships to be collected here, it is an increasing escalation of this deterrence that the United States is attempting to showcase to the world for China to put this idea of coalescing Taiwan into the greater Chinese nation, to put that off because the cost would be just too great. Over the last 2 weeks, North Korea has been relatively quiet. They did fire one rocket, and there is fear that these rockets, the new ones that they are testing now, contain multiple warheads. So the Japanese government, the Japanese maritime forces, the Ministry of Defense is all clamoring. They've decided that they're going to increase the budget by 100%, so it's going to be 2% of GDP. And the weapon systems that they are attempting to secure and enhance is going through a tremendous review. So this last week in the Diet, just to fall back a little bit, the Diet is in a 90-day extraordinary session. It's supposed to end on December 10th. Mr. Hagiura, who is the policy chief within the LDP, has said he wants to pass 60 bills. They're nowhere close to that, and they still are arguing about the unification church. They're arguing about the supplemental budget. It's not pandemonium, but it's real consternation. They're not going to be able to hit even close to their numbers during this extraordinary session, and likely they're going to have to extend it from January 10th to some unspecific date, but it'll definitely end in December because the Constitution requires that they start the ordinary session 180 days in January, and I think that will start January 10th or so. So in any event, the Prime Minister and the LDP is under a real timeline, a time crunch, and the Unification Church is eating up so much time. In fact, it is the reason why the Prime Minister's numbers are down. His numbers are down for two reasons. Number one, the Unification Church, his response, his swiftness, his decisiveness in dealing with the Unification Church. And over the last week, he has made some decisions about how we're going to clamp down, how we're going to limit donations, how we're going to be able to rescue some of the victims. It's been a real, fingernail and teeth fight there because the coalition partner is Komeito. They're the political arm of Soka Gakkai. Soka Gakkai is looking at all of these ramifications of what the Unification Church did, and they're saying, we did the same thing. We were selling these trophies, these statues embedded with all sorts of spiritual powers, and people would come and give us huge donations, their family inheritance, because we would help rescue their entire family from hell and damnation. That was the same tactic that was being used by the Unification Church. Apparently the Unification Church just kind of ratcheted up a little bit too much, was a little bit too greedy, created a lot of victims. There are victims in Soka Gakkai too, but they're able to fix those internally apparently, and it hasn't reached the level of public attention. The Unification Church issue has really the entire public angry, and politicians as well. So they did pass through the cabinet. It hasn't reached the floor of the Congress yet for being made into law. But what they're going to do is limit donations, and this fight, they need to appear to be really going after the Unification Church. There is such a huge voice for just disbanding the church. That would violate, according to some people's analysis, the Constitution, the separation of church and state and freedom of religion. But also, Soka Gakkai and the Komeito is really nervous about this, because selling these trophies, these statues, and getting donations from the people who belong to their church is the way that they fund themselves. And the funding is of such proportion that they can even set up a political action arm, even eclipsing a political party like Soka Gakkai did with Komeito. So I think that was the plan with the Unification Church. They were in the pockets of more than 180 LDP members, other members of other political parties as well, and that's all now coming out in the wash. So everybody who is tainted with that is a target of derision within the LDP and also within the opposition parties. That is what brought down Mr. Yamagiwa 3 weeks ago. He was the first cabinet minister in the administration to be resigned. That means he resigned voluntarily, but I think it's clear that he was asked to leave by the prime minister. 3 weeks later, we have the Minister of Justice, who also resigned on Friday. I think this is also an example of him resigning voluntarily, but he was told, you need to get out. He was replaced very quickly by former Agriculture Minister Saito. This individual, the Minister of Justice, is in the Kishida faction. That's the number 4 faction within the LDP. So it really hurts the prime minister at a time when he doesn't need that sort of a distraction. So if you're not familiar with what happened, there are Benkyokai, there are study groups, there are Hagimuskai that occur all the time throughout Tokyo. There are political fundraising events, breakfast briefings. I go to about, me or somebody on my team goes to, 5 a week or so. And they collect funds for people to come in and have breakfast or to listen to a briefing. This is where they get, political funds for election campaigns. And as you approach an election campaign, the number of these Hagimuskai, these Benkyokai, increases very rapidly. But in one of the Benkyokais for a Kishida faction member, to generate support for him and generate some funds and elevate his profile. So he's on stage, and then people come in and they talk about how wonderful he is. Usually the rooms, in a Kishida faction briefing like that, there will be maybe 200 people. I went to one from Mr. Motegi on Friday, I believe it was, 250 people, elegantly presented breakfast bento. But this happens all the time. In any event, the Justice Minister was speaking at one of these events where he just said, nobody really pays much attention to the Justice Minister until you sign a death warrant. And then everybody becomes excited and you're in the newspaper. But it's not really a position that develops much, respect or admiration. I don't get many more votes for it. And I certainly don't generate, political funds as a consequence of my position as a Minister of Justice. Those are the 2 comments that just exploded on Tuesday and Wednesday. So he has been known to say something like that in the past in other briefings and other kind of public statements. But this time it was just, people are looking for stones to pick up and throw at the prime minister. There are a lot of reasons to dislike him if you're in the opposition, or even if you're in the LDP and you're looking to kind of enhance your position. So like I said, he's the 4th largest faction within the LDP. There are 3 other large factions whose leaders are thinking, I could probably do a better job. This guy isn't really doing what he should be doing. He's prime minister, but he doesn't need to stay prime minister. So what's my angle? So there's a lot of action that goes on in the background that hopefully we can report to you as as actively as possible. Let me see what else I've got on this. The supplemental budget was passed. There was a little bit of bragging going on with the Prime Minister when he was talking about the supplemental budget. And I want to relate to you one of the things that he said, because it's somewhat insightful, and it also is one of the reasons why maybe people get a little bit mad at him for over talking, or maybe not even performing dynamically. So apparently the supplemental budget that he's proud of is going to boost the GDP of the country by about 4.6%. And that means that for the fiscal year 2023, because of this supplemental budget, this is supplemental, right? This is not the budget that they're going to discuss in January and February and pass in April. This is for the end part of 2022, that this tremendous budget will increase the GDP of the country by 4.6%, and in a kind of a very self-congratulatory way, he said it will lower consumer prices by about 1.2 percentage points throughout next year. So you're thinking that's not much to beat your chest about, but that's what he has to show for the amount of money that he was able to generate for this supplemental budget. It is true that COVID requires it. We are approaching the 8th wave. COVID czar Omi said that the next wave is probably going to be the largest. So that really upsets people. He said that on Friday, that the next wave, we are already approaching it now. The infections have increased, that this will be the largest. And on the day that he says that, the Prime Minister is off to an international travel. So if you remember that the reason why his numbers were so low was because of the Unification Church and because of COVID, this is not a good sign for him. I guess it's good that the COVID reaction, the Unification Church reaction, seems to be coming to a close. It's not sure yet. They've decided that they're going to limit the donations. They're going to find the victims. They're going to get recompensation for them. And then the law, it will be changed. And that's where they are. They're kind of stuck right now. So typically in Japanese politics, most of the laws come out of the various ministries. They're promoted. They're discussed in cabinet meetings. The cabinet approves them, and then they go into the floor. So some of these bills that we're talking about with the Unification Church, they're at the cabinet level now. And with the level of disarray caused by Yamagiwa's resignation, by the Minister of Justice's resignation, COVID, the reason why there's a kind of a standstill is because the opposition parties has said, they've wagged their finger at the Prime Minister. They said, if you don't fix this COVID situation, we're not going to participate in any of these other bills that you have. We understand Mr. Hagiudo wants to have 60 bills passed. Screw you. We want you to fix this issue first. So they're stopping diet deliberations. Other things are happening in different committees, but with regard to just moving the process forward, they have kind of hampered things happening for the Prime Minister, and he needs to fix that. So there is some progress going there. For the next 10 days, he's going to be out of country. This is a perfect time for something to happen. It usually happens when the Prime Minister is out of country. He's not there to handle things. He's busy with other things. Different things could happen. And it also really strengthens the hand of the chief cabinet secretary and the leader of the LDP, Mr. Motegi. So we have to watch this very carefully. And in the meantime, the military buildup, the review of military forces or naval forces just this last weekend. And just on Friday, yet another one called Keen Sword. It's a joint operation between the United States and Japan, mostly in the southern islands, Okinawa and that sort of thing. But it is a huge exercise. So it looks like military exercise after military exercise. It will just be one after the other. And you can imagine that, this is being watched very carefully by our dear leader in North Korea. The threat is that he will have his seventh nuclear test at some particular point in time. They don't know when, but they know that he's preparing for it. He's going to use that with maximum impact. The timing of that, and with all of the leaders here in Asia over the next 5 or 6 days, that could be an opportunity for him. Who knows? So let's see how that rolls out, and I'll keep an eye on that and report it to you as well. There's been another development. Many people complain. Maya, I think you actually posted on this, that Japan is always known to be slow-moving, very deliberative. It takes its time. The government moves very slowly, but when they want to move, they sure move. And what I'm talking about now is the creation of a consortium called Rapidus. So Rapidus. It's a consortium of, the big players, NEC, Toyota, all of these companies, to create a new chip, high-end chip. Maya, you posted on that, and the Japanese, if they want to get something done, they can do it.
They definitely can, and I think that this will be one of the consortiums that actually are quite quick to act and start production here, not the least because they have the backing of the government. So that's a big thing.
That's right. So this new consortium, we're only hearing about it now, but it's been talked about for several weeks. In April, the United States and Japan met in Washington, D.C. They went to talk about, supply chain, economic security. This was before the legislation was passed. So they made a lot of decisions. And in line with those decisions, they've done certain things, including passing legislation on economic security. One of the things that they did decide, and it just took them a couple of months to pull it together, although I think maybe the consortium of companies was eager to do that, is make a company that pulls in the best of all of these companies. They all pool their money together. The Japanese government provides subsidies for them too. And they launch, and they just launched on Thursday, this new consortium. It is a joint grouping of Toyota, Sony, NTT, SoftBank, Zoxia, NEC, MWF, and all of between them, they put in 70 billion yen, and that will be complemented by another 70 billion yen in subsidies by the Japanese government. This company is also developing a relationship, a new kind of a consortium called Leading Edge Semiconductor Technology Center, which is a group of not just Rapidus, but also research institutions and universities, including Tohoku University, my university, Tsukuba, and Tokyo, the University of Tokyo. So this is a really big deal. It's significant in that they are going to be focusing on, and there's probably something similar going on in the United States. The Japanese want to dominate the high-end chip manufacturing that is currently pretty much dominated not just by Taiwan. There are Americans, there are European countries that also have their own consortium and their own high-end, but they've got to have a fallback for TSMC, which is located in Taiwan now. They're building a new factory in Kumamoto, but long-term, for economic security purposes, for the just for developing their own industry and to move the technology forward, this is a big move. So it is some of some worthiness. Let's see what else we have. So there is in addition to all the warships in Sagami Bay, the Keen Sword operations that are going on in Okinawa, there's a lot of clamor for intelligence sharing of the Japanese with Canada, with Australia, with the United States, with the Quad members. And there seems to be a little bit of a hesitation there because I don't know how to say this, but the Japanese seem to be a little bit weak in intelligence, in cybersecurity, in encryption, in those things that kind of are the backbone of why they set up the digital agency in the first place. So Japan is coming from a position of weakness, trying to catch up as quickly as possible. I think they will, but I think it'll take a couple of years, just considering the number of capable, competent, trained professionals to deal with this sort of thing. Japan doesn't have a military industrial complex yet. So there aren't people that are trained. There aren't university programs that develop these kinds of individuals. There's still controversy about the constitutional situation with the self-defense forces. And also, the Coast Guard and the self-defense forces are separate entities. The Coast Guard reports to the Ministry of Land and Transportation, and the self-defense forces is under the Ministry of Defense. The Coast Guard has acquired a very sophisticated drone built by built by the United States. They purchased it maybe 2 years ago, and it's not an armed drone, but it's one of these large drones that can fly in high altitude and just watch the area over the Japanese territorial waters. They want to have another one that's so successful to use, very cost efficient, an expensive piece of machinery that requires a whole system. But the system for sharing the information collected by the Coast Guard is not really shared with the Ministry of Defense. A little bit curious, you might think, but that's because under their mandate, they are not supposed to be using or sharing or generating intelligence of a military component. They are the Coast Guard. They're supposed to be for protection of and management of Japan's territorial waters, but not with the military component. So there's a bit of an issue there. They are now generating tremendous real-time intelligence over the naval properties of Japan, but they don't have the ability or the authorization to share it real-time with the Ministry of Defense. So they're going through a review of that to share that kind of information. You would have thought that if the Coast Guard isn't sharing that in real time, that's an issue, but why doesn't the Ministry of Defense or the Maritime Forces purchase their own dynamic drone? And that's probably in the cards too. So you're going to see a lot more in terms of drone autonomous technology, not just for military use, but also they're passing laws for vehicles, self-autonomous vehicles in the rural areas, basically to deal with the older folks and delivering food and medicine in areas where it's very less populated. I think this will be something of a test market, but like with Rapidus, Maya, I think this will be a very quick rollout because just the number of truckers, the exhaustion reported, the accidents that occur because people are trying to reduce the cost of delivery, and delivery is such a big industry here. They're trying to have these autonomous vehicles on the road. It'll start with small vehicles and move on to trucks. Do you have anything on that, Maya?
Well, not as much as you do at the moment, but yes, I think that we have talked before that they have already mapped the territory of the country for drone deliveries and routes that are safe for the civil delivery, actually. Yes. Yeah. Right. So it's coming, and it's coming probably faster than we expected.
Yeah, I think it's the issue with truckers is a really serious issue here in Japan. If for those of you on the briefing who drive, if you're driving anytime at night, like midnight, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, the roads are just packed with trucks flowing into Tokyo, and in the morning they're flowing back out. But this need for truckers, for people to drive the trucks, the need is increasing, but the number of people who are doing that, are willing to do that, diminishing. So it's a huge issue. I think it's going to get attention very, very soon. And before you blink your eye, autonomous trucks will be delivering produce and material throughout Tokyo, I believe. They've got to change some laws. They've got to increase the technology. That's one of the purposes of this new consortium, Radius. They know that autonomous vehicles is a huge issue. They need new technology. They need new chips. They're building maybe 2 nanometer chips, or that's one of the desires that they've put the consortium together. They already have a huge contract with IBM to produce these. So there's a lot to look forward to. The last thing I want to talk about today, we haven't talked about Seiwakai, the former Prime Minister Abe's political faction. It is the largest faction, 98. There have been no defections since the last time we talked about it. Mr. Aso's faction has increased by 1 over the last maybe 6 weeks. Otherwise, there's been very little defection. There's been very little new members coming in, which is not unusual. When you begin to see this, then it's time to review what's going on in Japanese politics and what's going on with the prime minister, because people are positioning themselves. Typically, when you see this accordionization, the increase or the decrease of the LDP political factions, it's either because of some sort of a scandal that's happened, or it's because there's preparation for something else that is coming down very quickly. So Seiwakai is the largest, with the death of the former prime minister and the titular head of Seiwakai. It's in a bit of flux. I would say some confusion, just because the leadership is not established. There's a consortium of maybe 4, 5, 6, depending on who you're talking to, who are leading this. No prominent leader has become identified, although several people have tried to self-identify themselves, and these have kind of been knocked down. So what I want to kind of relay to you is the determination of where Seiwakai is going and why it's going in the direction that I perceive it going. So in order to talk about that, I've got to tell you that there are 3 kinds of Diet members. There's Diet members who are elected on their own volition by their name. The voters write their name on the ballot, and they become a Diet member because they've had more votes than their competing candidate had. So on that prominence, they become a Diet member. And there's a pecking order of that class of Diet members based on how many votes they were able to generate. So there's a disparity, as you know, in the rural areas and in the cities. It takes less votes in the rural areas to elect a Diet member than it does in the cities. So they've come up with a gerrymandering solution to that called 10-10. But the point here is that the more votes that you get, the more proportion of votes from your district that you get, it tells people, other members of the Diet, where your pecking order is. The second class of Diet member is those who are on the proportional representation. So the party produces a list of people, and when you go into the vote, you have a couple of votes that you can make. One is for individuals, and then one is for political parties. And depending on how many votes the political party gets, then they go down the list sequentially. So if your name is on the list proportionately, it's not really because of your own splendor. It's because the party is doing a good job, and you have been nominated by the party to be one of those Diet members proportionally. So sometimes it's proportionally for the nation, sometimes it's proportionally for a district. So that's the second class, that you are proportional. You're not doing it on your name. You're doing it. You're leaning on the political party to help you get elected. And the third and the lowest is somebody who was on the list to have their own name written in, but they didn't make it. They failed. They weren't elected on that. but they were lucky enough for the political party to put their name on the list, probably not high, but somewhere on the list, so that if they lose because their splendor is not recognized by the people, they still will get elected because the party is doing a pretty good job. That's the third class of individual. So within Japanese Diet politics, everybody knows that. And one of the reasons why you might have infighting, or you might have people that don't talk to each other, they don't really recognize each other when they walk into the room, is because this pecking order is established. And if you don't acknowledge it, if you don't abide by it, if you don't give somebody that due deference that they feel like they deserve because they're in class 1 and you're in class 3, and even though I'm from a rural area and you're from a hot city like Tokyo or Osaka or Nagoya, you need to show a little bit more deference to me or my team or to the issues that I've promoted. So that happens quite a bit, this kind of infighting. But what this means with regard to Seiwakai is there are about 4 or 5 or 6 individuals who could be the next leader of Seiwakai. The most prominent one recently has voiced his desirability to be identified. The only problem with that is that although he's been elected, maybe 10 times, he's of the third list. He's not of the first list or the second list. And in order to be a leader of a faction like Seiwakai with 98 members, you really need to be of the first class. You need to be able to talk with people, and people need to show deference to you that is rightly deserved, not just because you've somehow been able to become the leader of the leaderless, up until now, Seiwakai. So there are other members that are there. Shimamura Hakubun, he's kind of been moved aside because of his deep involvement with the Unification Church. That's pretty much been cast aside and buried. You don't see him much in the press, but he is very influential within Seiwakai. He was a very good friend of Mr. Abe. He was Minister of State maybe 3 times, elected 9 times. So he was a good candidate, but he fell out because of the Unification Church. You've got Mr. Seko, who is very prominent. He's 59 years old. He's been a Minister of State 3 times. The problem with him is that he is in the upper house, not the lower house. The Prime Minister always comes from the lower house. The leader of the political faction is the most viable candidate to become the new Prime Minister. So just only because he's in the upper house, not in the lower house, it kind of diminishes his ability to be that leader. What's going to happen, clearly it's not a prediction, is that Mr. Seko, in the next election, he will resign from the upper house and run in the lower house. He will obviously win, but that will qualify him once again to be in the first category and also to be in the lower house so that he can potentially become Prime Minister. 59 years old, very presentable, very accomplished. So probably in the near future, you will see him as a candidate for Prime Minister. First of all, he's got to go from the upper house into the lower house. You've got, let me see, Matsumoto Hiroyuki, who's kind of, disappeared from consideration, even though he is also 59 years old. He's been elected 8 times. Then you've got Mr. Hagiura, who is the policy affairs chief within the LDP, very prominent. Yeah, he's got some issues, but he's, of the 6 people that I've talked about, he is up there pretty good. 6 times as repeated to the lower house. 58 years old. He's still got some good legs on him. But I think the one that really is attracting the most attention is Mr. Nishimura Yasutoshi, 7 times elected to the Diet and 59 years old. He is currently a minister in the cabinet. He's clean. Unification Church ties are, as far as I know, non-existent. Also with Konotaro, when people always talk about that, Konotaro has been really clean with regard to Unification Church ties. He has 0 ties. He runs a very clean ship. His office is very masterfully run by him, by his father. His father was Speaker of the House, you know. So he comes from a great pedigree, and he has good training. He's got good backing. But with regard to Nishimura, I think that probably when the wind dies down and things become a little bit more settled, he will eventually become appointed as the leader of the Seiwakai. That is in the works. You might have, we talked just maybe 2 weeks ago about the former prime minister's wife maybe running for that election in Yamaguchi, maybe coming into Seiwakai to have a little bit of his luster and maybe exude a little bit of leadership there. That's not in the works. That idea, that it's not a rumor, was actually worked on very carefully, that doesn't seem to be in the cards. So looks like Nishimura-san sensei is the hot choice there. Maya, I think I've gone on a little bit long here. I apologize for that, but I hope that explanation is useful to people and gives you a little bit of background on Japanese politics, how it runs, what are the ramifications. I'm so grateful once again for everybody tuning in. This is great stuff for me. I love talking about it. It is very important to be familiar with it. So thank you for spending your time on a Sunday morning with us. Your mic is
Thank you,
off.
Timothy. Well, thank you for the briefing. So,
and I didn't fall off the boat.
I'm looking forward to seeing. That's great. Yes. Thank you for keeping your balance there on board. Great. So let's continue on Clubhouse only. So I'm going to display the live stream now and on the other side. So
thank you very much, Maya.
Stay on board.